In oceans around the world, shark encounters can turn calm waters into scenes of chaos within seconds. Powerful jaws have struck surfers, divers, and swimmers without warning, leaving both physical and emotional scars in their wake. Survivors recall sudden shadows below, violent jolts, and desperate fights to reach safety, while others are remembered only through haunting discoveries at sea. In this video, you'll witness gripping real-life accounts of shark encounters, from unexpected brushes with danger to breathtaking escapes that redefine survival. The sun blazed mercilessly over Clearwater Beach, Florida, in July 2019, casting long shadows across the pristine white sand. This stretch of coastline had witnessed countless marine encounters throughout its history, from gentle manatee sightings to the occasional dolphin pod dancing through the surf. The area's unique geography, where the Gulf of Mexico's warm currents met the cooler Atlantic waters, created a natural highway for migrating marine life. Local fishermen had long spoken of the unpredictable tides that could strand everything from jellyfish to the occasional shark in the shallow waters near shore. Maya Delacroix, a 27-year-old marine biology graduate student from Tampa, had chosen this particular Tuesday morning for what she hoped would be a peaceful beach walk before her afternoon classes. The tourism season was at its peak, but the early hour meant fewer crowds and a better chance to observe any interesting marine specimens that might have washed ashore during the night's high tide. As Maya strolled along the water's edge, her trained eye scanning for unusual shells or sea creatures, she noticed a commotion about 50 yards ahead. A small crowd had gathered, their voices carrying on the ocean breeze. Lifeguards were setting up barriers, their whistles sharp against the sound of crashing waves. Maya quickened her pace, her curiosity piqued by what appeared to be something substantial lying in the surf. The sight that greeted her made her breath catch in her throat. A massive great white shark, easily 12 feet in length, lay partially beached in the shallow water. Its powerful tail occasionally thrashed against the wet sand, sending spray in all directions. The creature's prehistoric form was both magnificent and terrifying, its scarred hide bearing the scars of battles fought in the deep ocean. Maya estimated the shark weighed close to 2,000 pounds, a true apex predator now rendered helpless by the receding tide. Head lifeguard Marcus Thompson was busy directing beachgoers to maintain a safe distance while his team worked to establish a wider perimeter. Thompson had seen plenty of marine life wash ashore during his 15 years on the job, but nothing quite like this. The shark appeared to be alive but severely weakened. Its breathing was labored as its gills struggled to process the thin layer of water surrounding its massive frame. Maya found herself drawn closer despite the warnings echoing around her. Her academic training led her to believe this was a rare opportunity to observe one of nature's most efficient predators up close. The shark's black eyes, though clouded with stress, still held an alien intelligence that seemed to track movement around it. She noticed the creature's distinctive triangular dorsal fin bore several bite marks, indicating encounters with other sharks or possibly boat propellers. The morning sun was climbing higher, and Maya realized the shark's situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The tide was continuing to recede, leaving less and less water for the animal to breathe through its gills. She had read about similar strandings where well-meaning rescuers had attempted to help guide sharks back to deeper water. However, such efforts were extremely dangerous and rarely successful with animals of this size. Against her better judgment and ignoring the increasingly urgent warnings from the lifeguards, Maya began edging closer to the magnificent creature. Her heart pounded as she considered the scientific value of this encounter. Few researchers have ever had the opportunity to observe a great white in such circumstances. The shark's powerful muscles rippled beneath its skin as it continued its periodic thrashing, sending small waves across the sand. Thompson noticed Maya's approach and shouted for her to step back, but his voice was lost in the growing crowd noise as more beachgoers arrived to witness the spectacle. Maya knelt at what she believed was a safe distance, studying the shark's distinctive features. The creature's snout was perfectly designed for its role as an apex predator, housing rows of razor-sharp teeth that had evolved over millions of years. Something about the shark's distressed state triggered Maya's compassionate nature. Despite her scientific knowledge of the dangers involved, she found herself reaching forward, her fingers extended toward the creature's flank. The shark's skin felt surprisingly cold and rough beneath her touch, like coarse sandpaper that had been left in a freezer. For a brief moment, she felt connected to one of the ocean's most ancient and misunderstood inhabitants. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. The shark's massive head whipped around with shocking speed, its powerful jaws snapping shut on Maya's extended wrist with the force of a hydraulic press. Pain, unlike anything she had ever experienced, shot through her arm as the creature's teeth punctured skin and muscle. The shark began thrashing violently, its 2,000-pound body generating tremendous force as it tried to drag its perceived prey toward deeper water. Maya's scream pierced the morning air as she fought desperately to free herself from the creature's grip. Blood poured from the wounds, mixing with the salt water and sand around them. The shark's primitive brain had activated its feeding response, and Maya found herself locked in a life-or-death struggle with one of nature's most efficient killing machines. Thompson and his team rushed forward, their training kicking in, despite the unprecedented nature of the situation. Working together, they managed to apply a tourniquet to Maya's arm, while carefully creating enough disturbance to encourage the shark to release its grip. The creature, confused and weakened by its prolonged time out of proper water, finally let go and slumped back into the shallow surf. Maya collapsed onto the sand, her arm severely damaged but her life intact. The encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. Still, it would forever change her perspective on marine wildlife and the importance of maintaining respectful boundaries with apex predators, regardless of their apparent condition. The crystal-clear waters of the Bahamas stretched endlessly in all directions during the scorching August of 2017. This particular region of the Atlantic Ocean, roughly 60 miles northeast of Nassau, had served as a crucial shipping lane for centuries. Spanish galleons once navigated these same waters carrying precious cargo from the New World, while modern cargo vessels and luxury yachts now trace similar routes. The area was notorious among experienced sailors for its unpredictable weather patterns and the presence of large pelagic predators that thrived in the deep blue waters far from any continental shelf. Lena Kowalski, a 32-year-old professional yacht delivery captain from Fort Lauderdale, had been contracted to transport a 60-foot sailing yacht from the Bahamas to Miami. With over a decade of experience navigating Caribbean waters, Lena had earned a reputation for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering commitment to safety protocols. Her crew for this particular delivery consisted of 3 experienced sailors, each carefully selected for their expertise in navigating challenging offshore conditions. The yacht had been cutting through moderate swells at a steady 8 knots, when Lena noticed the mainsail's boom had developed an alarming vibration, and years of experience had taught her that seemingly minor rigging issues could quickly escalate into dangerous situations in open water. She instructed her crew to maintain course, while she went forward to investigate the loose hardware that appeared to be causing the problem. Working methodically along the port side of the vessel, Lena focused intently on adjusting the boom's tension, while the yacht continued its steady progress through the swells. The rhythmic motion of the boat and the consistent trade winds created what sailors often described as hypnotic conditions. It was during one particularly focused moment of adjustment that Lena lost her footing on the wet deck and tumbled silently over the side rails. The yacht continued sailing eastward, its autopilot system maintaining the predetermined course. At the same time, Lena's absence went completely unnoticed by her crew members, who were busy with their tasks below deck. The irony was not lost on experienced mariners who later heard the story of someone so safety-conscious falling victim to the very scenario she had trained others to prevent. Lena surfaced in the yacht's wake, her life jacket automatically inflating as designed, but the sound of wind and waves immediately swallowed her shouts. She watched helplessly as her vessel grew smaller on the horizon, its white sails eventually disappearing into the heat shimmer that danced across the water's surface. The reality of her situation settled in with frightening clarity. She was alone in open ocean, miles from the nearest land, with limited time before hypothermia or dehydration would begin to take their toll. The Bahamian waters maintained a temperature of roughly 82 degrees Fahrenheit, which provided some comfort against immediate hypothermia. Still, Lena knew that even in warm water, prolonged exposure would eventually prove fatal. She began implementing survival techniques she had learned during her Coast Guard training, conserving energy while maintaining visibility for potential rescue aircraft or vessels. After nearly 40 minutes of floating in the increasingly choppy seas, Lena noticed a subtle change in the water around her. The distinctive silhouette of a large shark appeared in her peripheral vision, its movements deliberate and calculated. She recognized the species immediately, an oceanic whitetip, one of the most aggressive and opportunistic predators found in deep water environments. The shark initially circled at a distance, its behavior consistent with the species' known hunting patterns. Oceanic whitetips were notorious for their persistence and lack of fear when investigating potential prey. Unlike their coastal cousins, these open ocean predators had evolved to take advantage of any feeding opportunity in the nutrient-poor waters they called home. Lena attempted to remain motionless, understanding that erratic movements could trigger the shark's predatory instincts. However, her efforts proved futile as the animal's curiosity intensified. The shark's approach became more direct with each pass, its distinctive white-tipped fins cutting through the surface as it closed the distance between them. The attack came without warning. The oceanic whitetip struck from below with explosive force, its powerful jaws clamping down on Lena's left shoulder. The impact drove her underwater as teeth designed for cutting through flesh and bone penetrated her wetsuit and found purchase in muscle tissue. Pain beyond description flooded her nervous system as the shark began its characteristic thrashing motion. Lena's survival instincts overrode the shock and pain as she fought desperately against her attacker. She drove her fist repeatedly into the shark's snout, while using her free hand to gouge at its eyes, targeting the sensitive areas that might force the predator to release its grip. The underwater struggle seemed to last an eternity, though it likely lasted only seconds. The shark released its hold momentarily, allowing Lena to break the surface and gasp for air. Blood from her shoulder wound began attracting the attention of the predator, whose primitive brain registered the injury as confirmation of successful prey. The second attack came as Lena tried to swim away, the shark's teeth grazing her hip as she twisted desperately to avoid another full bite. Fortune smiled on Lena when crew member David Chen finally noticed her absence and began scanning the horizon with binoculars. The yacht's captain immediately initiated emergency procedures, turning the vessel around while broadcasting distress calls on multiple radio frequencies. Chen spotted Lena's orange life jacket nearly a mile astern, barely visible among the whitecaps. The rescue operation required precise boat handling as the crew worked to retrieve Lena while avoiding further shark encounters. The oceanic whitetip had disappeared into the depths, apparently satisfied that its wounded prey was no longer viable. Lena was pulled aboard with severe lacerations to her shoulder and hip, her injuries requiring immediate first aid to control bleeding until helicopter evacuation could be arranged. The incident sparked renewed discussions about safety protocols for yacht delivery crews, particularly regarding the buddy system requirements when working on deck in open water conditions. The tropical waters surrounding Cairns, Queensland, Australia, shimmered under the intense December sun of 2015. This region of northeastern Australia had long been recognized as one of the world's most biodiverse marine environments, where the Great Barrier Reef met the coastal estuaries of the Queensland mainland. The area's complex network of mangrove channels, tidal flats, and river mouths created a unique ecosystem that supported everything from tiny tropical fish to massive saltwater crocodiles. Local Aboriginal communities had navigated these waters for thousands of years, developing an intimate understanding of the seasonal movements and behavioral patterns of the region's apex predators. Brandon Castellanos, a 19-year-old university student from Brisbane, had traveled north to Cairns for his summer holidays with plans to explore the region's famous waterways on his newly purchased jet ski. Brandon had grown up around boats and personal watercraft, having spent countless hours on Moreton Bay near his family home. His mechanical aptitude and love for marine engines had led him to study marine engineering, making this trip both a vacation and an opportunity to test his skills in unfamiliar waters. The morning of December 15th found Brandon navigating the intricate channels that wound through the mangrove forests south of Cairns. These waterways were particularly attractive to jet ski enthusiasts because of their protection from ocean swells and the stunning scenery created by the dense mangrove canopy. However, local fishing guides had long warned visitors about the area's hidden dangers, particularly during the wet season when river runoff and tidal changes created ideal conditions for bull sharks to hunt. Brandon had been riding for nearly 2 hours when he noticed an unusual vibration coming from his jet ski's engine. The sound was subtle but persistent, suggesting a possible issue with the impeller or cooling system. His engineering training had taught him never to ignore mechanical anomalies, especially when operating in remote areas where rescue might be hours away. He decided to investigate the problem immediately rather than risk a complete breakdown far from shore. Spotting a shallow bay surrounded by mangroves, Brandon carefully maneuvered his jet ski toward what appeared to be a protected area where he could safely conduct his inspection. The water was surprisingly murky due to recent rainfall and tidal stirring, reducing visibility to only a few feet in any direction. Local weather patterns during the wet season often created these conditions, as runoff from the nearby mountains carried sediment and organic matter into the coastal waters. Brandon shut off the engine and slipped into what he estimated to be waist-deep water, keeping one hand on the jet ski's hull for stability. The water felt refreshingly cool against his sun-heated skin, and he appreciated the break from the intense tropical heat. He began his inspection by checking the jet ski's intake grate for debris that might be causing the vibration, methodically examining each component while mentally cataloging potential solutions. The attack came from directly below with the explosive force characteristic of bull shark hunting behavior. Brandon felt, rather than saw, the massive predator as it struck, its powerful jaws clamping down on his lower thigh with crushing pressure. The shark's teeth, designed for holding and tearing prey, penetrated through his board shorts and deep into the muscle tissue beneath. Pain beyond comprehension flooded his nervous system as the animal began its signature thrashing motion, attempting to disorient and weaken its prey. Brandon's scream echoed across the mangrove channels as he fought desperately to maintain his grip on the jet ski, while the shark continued its violent attack. The predator's estimated weight of over 300 pounds generated tremendous force as it attempted to drag its prey away from the shallow water. Brandon could feel the shark's powerful tail fins striking his legs as the animal worked to maintain its grip while positioning itself for a more effective bite. Training from countless hours of swimming and water safety courses kicked in as Brandon began striking the shark's snout with his free fist, targeting the sensitive nerve clusters that might force the predator to release its hold. The underwater struggle seemed to last forever, though marine biologists later estimated the entire encounter lasted less than 20 seconds. Bull sharks were known for their tenacious attacks, but they typically released prey that fought back effectively rather than waste energy on prolonged struggles. The shark finally released its grip and disappeared into the murky water, leaving Brandon clinging to his jet ski with blood pouring from severe lacerations on his thigh. The predator's departure was as sudden as its arrival, demonstrating the opportunistic nature of bull shark hunting behavior. These animals were known to strike quickly and decisively, but they rarely engaged in prolonged attacks when faced with determined resistance. Brandon managed to pull himself back onto his jet ski despite the severe pain from his injuries, his adrenaline providing the strength necessary to escape the water before the shark could return. He immediately started the engine and began racing toward the main channel, leaving a trail of blood in the water behind him. His knowledge of the area's geography proved crucial as he navigated the complex waterway system while fighting shock and blood loss. Local fishing guide Tommy Morrison was returning from an early morning charter when he spotted Brandon's erratic driving pattern and the obvious distress signals the young man was attempting to communicate. Morrison immediately recognized the signs of a shark attack and began emergency first aid procedures while radioing for helicopter evacuation. His quick thinking and experience with marine emergencies undoubtedly saved Brandon's life. The helicopter arrived within 30 minutes, airlifting Brandon to a hospital in Cairns, where surgeons worked for several hours to repair the extensive tissue damage and stop internal bleeding. The attack had severed several important blood vessels, but fortunately it had missed major arteries that could have proved fatal. Brandon's recovery required multiple skin grafts and months of physical therapy, but he eventually regained full use of his leg. Marine biologists who investigated the incident noted that the area where Brandon was attacked had become increasingly popular with bull sharks during the wet season, when river runoff created ideal hunting conditions in the shallow estuaries. The combination of reduced visibility, abundant prey fish, and the vibrations from Brandon's jet ski engine had likely attracted the predator to investigate what it perceived as a potential meal. The pristine atolls of French Polynesia sparkled like scattered emeralds across the vast Pacific Ocean in March 2013. Fakarava Atoll, part of the Tuamotu archipelago, represented one of the most remote and untouched marine environments on Earth. This UNESCO World Heritage Site had remained largely unchanged for centuries, its coral formations supporting an incredible diversity of marine life that thrived in the nutrient-rich waters flowing between the atoll's two main passes. Local Polynesian communities had fished these waters for generations, developing a profound respect for the ocean's apex predators that ruled the deeper channels surrounding the reef. The atoll's unique geography created a natural amphitheater where warm surface waters mixed with cooler currents from the deep Pacific, establishing ideal conditions for large pelagic species. French marine biologists had documented over 50 species of sharks in the area, including massive schools of gray sharks, hammerheads, and the occasional tiger shark that ventured into the shallower lagoon areas during feeding periods. Emily Moncler, a 39-year-old travel photographer from Lyon, France, had arrived at Fakarava as part of an ambitious project documenting the world's most pristine coral reef systems. Her underwater photography had earned international recognition, with her images appearing in prestigious publications. Emily's technical expertise and artistic vision had made her one of Europe's most sought-after marine photographers. However, she was equally known for her willingness to venture into remote locations that other photographers considered too challenging or dangerous. The morning of March 22nd found Emily preparing for what she hoped would be her most spectacular shoot of the expedition. Local dive guides had reported unusual activity near the South Pass, where strong currents created ideal conditions for photographing large marine life against dramatic coral backdrops. The area was particularly famous for its shark populations, which attracted photographers and marine enthusiasts from around the world. Emily joined a small group of experienced divers led by local guide Teva Rapoto, who had been exploring these waters for over 20 years. Rapoto's knowledge of the atoll's currents, marine life patterns, and seasonal variations made him an invaluable resource for visiting photographers seeking to capture the area's most spectacular underwater scenes. The group's plan called for a drift dive along the outer reef wall, where they could photograph the sharks that typically congregated in the stronger currents. The dive began without incident, with the group descending along the dramatic coral wall that plunged into the deep blue Pacific. Emily immediately began photographing the incredible coral formations and schools of tropical fish that created living tapestries of color against the reef face. The visibility was exceptional, extending well over 100 feet in all directions, providing ideal conditions for wide-angle photography. As the dive progressed, Emily became increasingly focused on a particular coral formation that seemed to glow with an inner light in the filtered sunlight. Her artistic eye recognized the potential for a truly spectacular image, but achieving the perfect composition required her to swim slightly away from the main group. She signaled to Rapoto that she intended to photograph the formation, and he acknowledged her signal while continuing to monitor the other divers. The coral formation was located in slightly deeper water, requiring Emily to descend an additional 20 feet below the rest of the group. Her concentration on achieving the perfect lighting and composition caused her to drift further from her companions than she had initially intended. The area's strong currents made it difficult to maintain position, and she found herself working harder than usual to stabilize herself for the complex shots she was attempting. It was during one of these intensive photography sessions that Emily first noticed movement in her peripheral vision. A large shadow passed through the deeper water beyond her immediate field of view, its presence more felt than seen. Tiger sharks were known to patrol these deeper areas, but sightings were relatively rare and usually involved brief encounters with curious but non-aggressive animals. The attack came without warning from the deep blue water beyond the reef wall. The tiger shark, estimated by witnesses to be over 12 feet in length, struck with the explosive force characteristic of ambush predators. Its massive jaws clamped down on Emily's torso with crushing pressure, immediately causing catastrophic internal injuries. The shark's powerful bite force, measured at over 3,000 pounds per square inch, proved instantly fatal as vital organs were crushed and major blood vessels severed. Rapoto spotted the attack almost immediately and began signaling frantically for the other divers to surface, while he swam toward the disturbance. The water around Emily had turned red with blood, and the massive tiger shark was visible as it maintained its grip on her body. The predator's behavior suggested that it was not feeding opportunistically, but had instead identified Emily as legitimate prey, possibly due to her isolated position and erratic movements while photographing. The shark released Emily briefly, allowing her body to drift in the current while it repositioned itself for a second attack. This behavior was consistent with documented tiger shark hunting patterns, in which the predator typically delivers an initial devastating bite, followed by a period of assessment before delivering additional attacks. The second strike was even more violent than the first, with the shark's serrated teeth severing Emily's left leg just below the hip. By the time Rapoto reached the scene, Emily was clearly beyond help. The massive blood loss and trauma from the shark's attacks had been instantly fatal, though the guide continued his rescue attempt in the desperate hope that she might somehow have survived. The tiger shark had disappeared back into the deep water, leaving behind a scene that would haunt the experienced dive guide for the rest of his career. The recovery operation required assistance from French military personnel stationed on nearby Hao Atoll, as the remote location made immediate evacuation impossible. An investigation later revealed that a local fishing vessel had been cleaning fish near the South Pass earlier that morning, inadvertently creating a feeding stimulus that may have attracted the tiger shark into the shallower areas where the dive was taking place. Emily's death sent shockwaves through the international diving and photography communities, highlighting the inherent risks involved in exploring remote marine environments. Her final photographs, recovered from her underwater camera housing, captured some of the most stunning reef images ever documented at Fakarava, serving as a lasting testament to her artistic vision and dedication to marine conservation. The volcanic peaks of São Miguel Island pierced the Atlantic horizon like ancient sentinels during the crisp October of 2018. The Azores archipelago, positioned strategically in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, has served as a crucial waypoint for transatlantic navigation for over 5 centuries. Portuguese explorers first discovered these remote islands in the 15th century, establishing settlements that would become vital stopping points for ships crossing between Europe and the Americas. The surrounding waters, fed by nutrient-rich currents from both the Gulf Stream and the Canary Current, supported an extraordinary diversity of marine life, including some of the Atlantic's most impressive pelagic predators. The deep waters surrounding São Miguel were particularly renowned among marine biologists for their populations of blue sharks, sleek predators that migrated vast distances across the Atlantic in search of prey. These elegant animals, with their distinctive cobalt blue coloration and streamlined bodies, were perfectly adapted for life in the open ocean. Local fishermen had long reported encounters with blue sharks in the deeper waters off the island's southern coast, where steep underwater cliffs dropped precipitously into the abyssal depths of the Atlantic basin. Hugo Esperanza, a 28-year-old professional freediver from Barcelona, Spain, had traveled to the Azores specifically to explore these legendary deep-water environments. Hugo's reputation as one of Europe's most accomplished freedivers had been built through years of pushing the boundaries of human underwater endurance. His personal best dive reached depths of over 60 meters on a single breath, a feat that required not only exceptional physical conditioning but also profound mental discipline and an intimate understanding of marine environments. The morning of October 14th found Hugo preparing for what he hoped would be his deepest dive in Azorean waters. Local weather conditions were ideal, with minimal surface wind and excellent underwater visibility extending well beyond 50 meters. Hugo had selected a dive site approximately 3 miles offshore, where bathymetric charts indicated the seafloor dropped to over 200 meters depth within a relatively short distance from the surface. Hugo's support team consisted of experienced safety divers and his longtime diving partner, Carlos Mendoza, who monitored all deep attempts from a specialized boat equipped with emergency oxygen and communication equipment. The team's safety protocols had been refined through years of extreme diving expeditions, with multiple redundant systems designed to handle any emergency that might occur during deep freediving attempts. The dive began with Hugo's characteristic methodical preparation routine. He spent nearly 30 minutes controlling his breathing and heart rate while visualizing his planned descent profile. The target depth was 30 meters, where he intended to photograph a school of squid that local fishermen had reported seeing in recent days. Hugo's underwater photography had become increasingly important to his sponsorship arrangements, and capturing images of deep-water marine life helped justify the expenses associated with his extreme diving pursuits. Hugo's descent was flawless, his streamlined technique allowing him to reach 30 meters with minimal oxygen consumption. The underwater environment at this depth was dramatically different from surface conditions, with filtered sunlight creating an ethereal blue atmosphere that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions. The water temperature had dropped several degrees, and Hugo could feel the familiar pressure changes that indicated he was entering the domain of truly pelagic marine life. It was at the maximum depth of his dive that Hugo first encountered the school of squid he had been seeking. The cephalopods moved in perfect synchronization, their translucent bodies creating mesmerizing patterns as they responded to his presence. Hugo began photographing the scene, his camera's strobe lights illuminating the squid against the deep blue background in ways that surface lighting could never achieve. The presence of the blue shark was initially so subtle that Hugo almost missed it entirely. A shadow at the very edge of his peripheral vision suggested movement. Still, the animal's coloration blended so perfectly with the surrounding water that it remained nearly invisible until it was within striking distance. Blue sharks were known for their curious nature and their tendency to investigate unusual objects or movements in their territory. Still, they were generally considered among the less aggressive shark species. Hugo's first clear view of the shark revealed an animal of impressive size, probably measuring close to 3 meters in length. The blue shark's distinctive features were unmistakable. Its elongated pectoral fins, pointed snout, and brilliant blue coloration that gave the species its name. The animal's movements were fluid and graceful, suggesting the effortless swimming style that allowed blue sharks to cover enormous distances across ocean basins. The shark's initial behavior appeared consistent with typical blue shark curiosity. It maintained a respectful distance while circling Hugo's position, apparently investigating this unusual intruder in its domain. Hugo continued his photography session, keeping the shark in his peripheral vision as he understood that sudden movements or aggressive gestures could trigger a defensive response from the predator. The situation changed dramatically when Hugo began his ascent toward the surface. Perhaps triggered by the rapid vertical movement or the photographer's changing silhouette, the blue shark's demeanor shifted from curious to aggressive. The animal accelerated toward Hugo with obvious predatory intent, its streamlined body cutting through the water with frightening efficiency. The attack came at approximately 20 meters depth, just as Hugo was beginning to feel the physiological effects of oxygen depletion that signaled the end of his safe diving time. The shark struck his extended forearm with precision, its needle-like teeth designed for gripping slippery prey such as squid and small fish. The bite penetrated Hugo's wetsuit and found purchase in the muscle tissue beneath, sending shockwaves of pain through his nervous system. Hugo's training took over as he fought to control his natural panic response while dealing with both the shark attack and his rapidly diminishing oxygen reserves. He struck the shark's snout with his free hand while simultaneously kicking toward the surface, understanding that his survival depended on reaching breathable air before losing consciousness. The blue shark maintained its grip momentarily before releasing him and making another pass, this time grazing his dive fin as he kicked desperately upward. The shark's behavior suggested a calculated assessment rather than a feeding frenzy. Blue sharks were known to test potential prey items before committing to full-scale attacks, and Hugo's aggressive response had convinced the predator that he was not suitable prey. The animal disappeared into the blue depths as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Hugo to complete his emergency ascent with blood streaming from his injured arm. Carlos spotted Hugo's distress immediately upon his arrival at the surface and began emergency first aid procedures while radioing for helicopter evacuation. The bite wounds, while not life-threatening, required immediate medical attention to prevent infection and assess potential nerve damage. Hugo's survival was largely attributed to his exceptional physical conditioning and his ability to remain calm in the face of extreme stress. The rugged coastline of Kaikoura, New Zealand, stretched along the South Island's eastern shore like a battle-scarred fortress during the frigid July of 2016. This remarkable region, where the seaward Kaikoura Range plunged dramatically into the Pacific Ocean, had been shaped by millions of years of tectonic activity and marine erosion. The area's unique underwater topography has created one of the world's most productive marine ecosystems, where warm subtropical currents collide with cold Antarctic waters, producing an upwelling effect that supports a diverse range of marine life, from tiny krill to massive sperm whales. Maori communities had inhabited this coast for over 8 centuries, developing sophisticated fishing techniques and an intimate knowledge of the ocean's seasonal rhythms. European whalers arrived in the 19th century, establishing Kaikoura as one of New Zealand's most important whaling stations until the industry's decline in the early 20th century. The town's transformation into an ecotourism destination had brought new economic prosperity while highlighting the area's extraordinary marine biodiversity. Mason Quartermain, a 35-year-old adventure kayaking guide from Christchurch, had been leading expeditions along the Kaikoura coast for over 8 years. His reputation as one of New Zealand's most experienced sea kayaking instructors had been built through countless hours, navigating the region's challenging waters, where sudden weather changes and powerful currents demanded exceptional skill and judgment. Mason's intimate knowledge of local conditions and marine life had made him a sought-after guide for international visitors seeking authentic New Zealand wilderness experiences. The morning of July 19th found Mason conducting a solo reconnaissance paddle to assess conditions for a client group scheduled to arrive later that week. Winter storms had been particularly severe that season, and Mason wanted to personally evaluate the sea state and identify any potential hazards before committing to a full expedition. His bright yellow sea kayak cut through the moderate swells with the efficiency that came from years of experience in these waters. Mason had been paddling for approximately 2 hours when he decided to take a brief rest near a rocky headland that provided some protection from the prevailing southwesterly wind. The area was locally known for its dramatic underwater drop-offs, where the seafloor plunged from shallow rocky reefs to depths exceeding 200 meters within a few hundred yards of the shore. These underwater cliffs created ideal hunting grounds for large predators. Though Mason had never experienced any concerning wildlife encounters during his years guiding in the area, the water around the headland was unusually clear for winter conditions, with visibility extending well beyond 20 meters in all directions. Mason could see schools of blue cod moving along the rocky bottom, their movements creating subtle disturbances that rippled upward through the water column. Seabirds worked the surface nearby, diving repeatedly to take advantage of what appeared to be a productive feeding area. Mason's kayak drifted quietly in the gentle swells as he consulted his GPS unit and made notes about current conditions and potential landing sites for his upcoming client group. The methodical approach to route planning had become second nature during his years as a professional guide, and he took pride in the detailed preparation that ensured safe and memorable experiences for his clients. The attack came without warning. The massive great white shark struck from directly below with explosive force, its powerful jaws clamping down on the kayak's stern section with enough pressure to crack the fiberglass hull. The impact was so sudden and violent that Mason initially thought he had struck a submerged rock or been hit by another vessel. The reality of his situation became terrifyingly clear when he saw the distinctive triangular head and black eyes of one of nature's most efficient predators. The shark, estimated by marine biologists who later investigated the incident to be over 4 meters in length, had mistaken Mason's yellow kayak for a seal or other marine mammal. Great whites were known to attack from below when hunting seals, using their incredible speed and power to deliver devastating strikes that disabled prey before it could escape to the surface. Before Mason could react to the initial impact, the shark repositioned itself and clamped its jaws around his left forearm. The predator's teeth, perfectly designed for cutting through flesh and bone, penetrated through his wetsuit and found purchase in the muscle and tissue beneath. Pain beyond description flooded Mason's nervous system as the shark began the characteristic head-shaking motion that great whites use to disable and disorient their prey. Mason's survival instincts overrode the shock and terror as he began fighting desperately for his life. He struck the shark's snout repeatedly with his free hand while simultaneously kicking at the animal's gills, targeting the sensitive areas that might force the predator to release its grip. The underwater struggle seemed to last an eternity, though marine biologists later estimated the entire encounter lasted less than 15 seconds. The great white's behavior suggested confusion rather than committed predation. The shark's powerful bite had established that Mason was not its intended prey, and the vigorous resistance he was providing convinced the predator to seek easier targets elsewhere. The animal released its grip suddenly and disappeared into the deeper water with the same explosive speed that had characterized its initial attack. Mason found himself alone in his damaged kayak with blood pouring from severe lacerations on his arm and hand. The shark's teeth had caused extensive tissue damage and severed several important blood vessels, though fortunately, no major arteries had been compromised. His immediate priority was controlling the bleeding while attempting to paddle toward shore with his one functional arm. The damaged kayak was taking on water through the cracks created by the shark's initial impact, making progress toward shore increasingly difficult. Mason used his emergency whistle to signal for help while continuing to paddle weakly with his uninjured arm. His years of experience in challenging marine environments had taught him to remain calm under pressure, and he methodically implemented emergency procedures while fighting shock and blood loss. Local fishing boat captain Trevor Mackenzie was returning from an early morning fishing trip when he heard Mason's whistle signals echoing across the water. Mackenzie immediately spotted the damaged kayak and the obvious distress of its occupant. Recognizing the signs of a marine wildlife encounter from his decades of experience in Kaikoura waters, his quick response and knowledge of emergency first aid procedures undoubtedly saved Mason's life. The helicopter evacuation to a hospital in Wellington required precise coordination between multiple rescue agencies as Mason's condition was deteriorating rapidly due to blood loss and the onset of hypothermia. Surgeons worked for several hours to repair the extensive tissue damage and restore circulation to his injured hand. However, permanent nerve damage resulted in reduced functionality that effectively ended his career as a professional kayaking guide.